Hi, everybody. I think I don't need to repeat my name. Thank you for that. But a few words about myself. I work at Intel Open Source Technology Center in Finland, but I am Italian, in case you didn't guess that already. I'm a program manager, meaning that I spend most of my time staring at Jira and hoping that something happens. But I'm also trying to use our own dog food as much as I can as a user, not a very advanced one, but I try. So the previous talk by Niels was the best possible introduction I could hope for. I certainly couldn't have done it myself that well, but let me still tell you the story a little bit from our point of view and how we got to Crosswalk. So as you all know, web apps 15, 20 years ago were very limited. They were actually pages, not apps. They couldn't do anything that native apps can do. And then the technologies that we love so much, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, came along, and they got better. Now, fast forward to today, they're very powerful and can do things comparable to native apps on many platforms. And we at Intel, in our team, which is the web team, we work a lot on both the standardization side of things, and we also work on the upstream browser engines like Chromium. And like I said, standardization, there is a lot of APIs we work on and that many big companies work on to access all the capabilities of devices. There is location, NFC has been worked on, web audio, WebGL, you know it, and it's a very dynamic environment, so it's not standing still at all. But if you are a hybrid app developer, you're not, as you heard, getting much of that. So you have to use the common denominator, which is pretty small. And for us, that's a problem because we do all this work on these features and APIs, and then there is a large community of people making great apps who cannot use it. And so we started to think that maybe, so if you're a hybrid application developer, you can create a web app using web components, like Polymer in this case, that runs some WebGL in it. Smoother than this, actually, but the video is edited a bit badly. And you can run it on Lollipop, and it will work just fine like this. But if you run it on some KitKats, it's going to look like this, because there is no WebGL. And if you run it on an even older device, it's probably going to crash and look like this. So about 2 years ago, in 2013, we started to think that maybe there is a way that we can bring all these new web technologies to hybrid application developers so that it would all behave the same on all Android devices so that you can reach the widest possible market and still benefit from all this web innovation that we do. So that's how we created the Crosswalk project. So Crosswalk is, we like to call it a runtime because originally we focused on the HTML5 side of things. So the idea was to run HTML5 apps standalone without any plugins or anything like that. But people prefer to call it a web view because in the end, that's the usage that most people do in hybrid application with tools like Cordova. And it's based on Chromium and Blink, the open source foundation of the Chrome browser, as you know. So our goals with Crosswalk are, of course, to enable advanced web features to all application developers and reduce Android fragmentation on Android 4.0 and later. We tried to go as far back as 2.x, but it just wasn't possible. And Chrome doesn't run there either. So it would be a huge effort for us. Performance, of course, is very important, and it's also important to the Chrome team, so they work a lot on it and do a lot of improvements. We test it extensively on each release every week, and we treat the regressions very seriously, so we're very much committed to keep Crosswalk performing well. Working with standards is important to us, both in using the standards as they're created, but also we use Crosswalk to implement early drafts and features that are not yet completely approved. And that's a way for us to showcase what you're doing, try it in the field, get feedback, and also show in the standardization bodies that it has a practical application and there is an implementation existing. What we are not doing, or at least that's not what we set out to do in the beginning, is to make a drop-in replacement for the web view. So if we were to replicate the exact same APIs as the Android WebView, we would get stuck in the same problems that the WebView has that led it to where it is now. So we started with a very small set, and then we are expanding that based on what people find important to use. Sometimes this is a problem with some of the Cordova plugins, and then when that comes out, we add the missing APIs when it's requested. So you can go to our Jira, and where I'm staring all the time, and you can add the request for the feature, and usually it comes pretty fast if it doesn't really lock us down to something. And then we realized, so we provide some standalone tools to package your applications with Crosswalk, but we realized that people have their own tools already, that they're very popular. They certainly don't want to change them. So we want to make Crosswalk easy to integrate in the tools that developers love already now. And we've had some good stories in that respect. So maybe you know that Intel itself has an IDE for HTML5 applications called the XDK. So Crosswalk has been integrated since 2013, the end of 2013, and you can build Crosswalk apps with the XDK since then. And then we worked a lot with the Cordova project, because originally we made a fork to embed the Crosswalk WebView, to replace the platform WebView with Crosswalk. But then, since the release 4.0 on Cordova Android, as you've heard in the beginning, it's possible to have pluggable web views, and Crosswalk is one of them. And the same is true with the latest PhoneGap. You can use Crosswalk as an option there, and the Ionic guys put it as an option in their beta release, and I don't know if it made it to the 1.0, but hopefully it will. And there are some other tool vendors that we've worked with. Cocos is a game engine maker, AppGyver, Monaka, and Google Mobile Chrome Apps is also using Crosswalk to build for devices before Lollipop. And last but not least, it's open source. The code is all on GitHub. We welcome participation. We haven't had a huge amount of contributions so far. I hope that's not because of the attitude. But please come join us in our GitHub and report bugs and help us figure out one of the biggest problems we have is that, and I've heard that today and yesterday as well, is that people try out some plugins or some features and they don't work for them. But then it's very hard to get a reproducible test case for us. So we try to test as many plugins as possible, but there is only so much we can do. So please, if you're allergic to Jira, which I mentioned already, I don't know how many times, don't use it, but just send us a sample code, and I'll file the Jira for you. That's not a problem. It's BSD licensed and 3 clause, and we release every 6 weeks, like Chrome or Chromium. So we update every 6 weeks to the latest Chromium beta, and then we keep updating until it goes to stable. And we have a similar structure of Canary, beta, and stable channels, which are built daily or a bit less than daily, so that you can try the latest features right away. So there's going to be a tutorial tomorrow if you're there, but just in a nutshell, how do you add Crosswalk to your Cordova application, for example, which is the simplest way right now, and I think with PhoneGap it will be pretty much the same. So first of all, you have to use the latest command line version 5.0, and you create your app, add the Android platform, and then you just add the Crosswalk plugin like this. It's hosted in NPM, and it's downloaded and installed, and it's there. And then you build, and you get the app. Like I said, you can also use the Intel XDK to do it. There is an option to build for Crosswalk if you are into IDEs. And we also provide standalone tools, like I said in the beginning. This is probably only interesting for you if you want to try it out quickly, or if you have developed a web app and you just want to port it to mobile without hassling with plugins and things like that. But anyway, you can install our command line tools from NPM as well, create an app. This will download a version of Crosswalk, either stable or beta, depending on how you configure it. And finally, you build it. Oops, sorry. Right. So what do you get when you build a Crosswalk application? Usually, by default, you get 2 APKs. So the way it works is that the whole web view, so a big part of Chrome basically, is bundled with your app. And also, this is CPU architecture specific, so it has to be compiled natively for either ARM or Intel architectures. So that's why you get 2 packages. And Crosswalk adds some size to your app, so it's about 20 megabytes. You can also, very important, you have to submit both of the APKs to the store. It's not exactly straightforward how to do it from the developer console interface, but we have instructions on the web anyway. It's not that hard either. But for some reason, if you don't want to publish 2 APKs, you can bundle both versions of the runtime with your app and get only 1 APK, but then you get 40 megabytes extra, which is probably too much for you. And about the size, that's usually the main complaint that we hear about Crosswalk. On the other hand, we also heard that in the end it's worth it. So the benefit that it brings, it's worth the 20 megabytes extra. And anyway, we're working on that, as I'll describe in a moment. There is also a so-called shared mode, where you can separate the Crosswalk APK and your app APK, so that your package only has the HTML5 resources, and then Crosswalk is a separate package, and it can be shared among different applications that use Crosswalk. And of course, you have to get it to the device in some way. I'll talk about that as well. And then we support the WebRTC manifest file. If you're using this in a web application, you probably know that this is a way to describe how your app is if your web page is an application, how it's installed to the device as standalone. You can say what icon it has, whether it's in landscape and so forth. And then we've added a few extensions, so you can use that as well. But it's not just about providing one web view for all Android versions. So we do a bit more on Crosswalk. So we are developing features all the time. Some of them are quite advanced, and you may have seen some demos in the lobby between the talks. So one API that we have added is called WebGL. As you probably know, your device, even your mobile device, has a pretty powerful GPU, as we heard also sometime back today. And you can offload. There is a library, a native library, called OpenCL, which is also a standard, with which you can offload some computational tasks from the CPU to the GPU. So we've exposed that in JavaScript, and with that you can achieve, if you know how to use it, of course, you can achieve pretty dramatic speedups in things like manipulating 3D objects, like in this case. So the demo on the right, it's all JavaScript, but it's using the WebGL API. Also, about parallel computation, your CPU has the ability to compute operations on vectors in parallel on 4, 8, 16 elements, depending on what architecture it is. So we have modified the V8 JavaScript engine to take advantage of this and expose it again as a JavaScript API. And that's another way to compute more data at the same time. So in this example here, that was also in the demo outside, we try to show as many birds as possible and still keep the 30 FPS. And the one on the right is using the SIMD enhancement. And as you see, we have about twice the birds with this demo. So it's not bunnies, but it works. Another thing we've worked on is the presentation API. So this is also been standardized in WebRTC. It's a way to show content on a secondary device. It's not screencasting, so your application decides what content is shown. And so you can, for example, have a game running on your device, show the game area on the screen wirelessly using Miracast in this case, and then show the controls on your device. And Crosswalk supports the Gamepad API too, so you could extend this use case pretty nicely. What's next? So I talked about the size, and although I said that it's worth it, we also think that if people complain so much about it, we should do something about it. So we created a branch, we call it Crosswalk Lite, where we tried to make it as small as we could, mostly by removing some features, but also by changing the compression of the application. And we managed to bring it down to 10 more or less 10 megabytes, but we call it, for now, experimental. It's there, it's built, you can use it, and we make the releases of it every day, but because we had to change quite a lot of Chromium to do this, we don't yet feel as confident as the rest of our releases to promote this for production. But actually, we would like you to use it and tell us how it works and if there are any problems. Also, we are putting Crosswalk in the Play Store. I mentioned the shared mode, so this is not yet public in the store. It's an internal beta, but anyway, it's pretty close to being released. So there is a Crosswalk APK in the store, and you can build your app so that the user is, the first time that the user launches any Crosswalk app, he or she is sent to the store, has to, unfortunately, manually download Crosswalk, and then when it's done once, that works for all of the Crosswalk apps. Of course, going to the store and installing manually is not great, but if it works for you, or if you can pre-install Crosswalk in some way, then that's also a solution. And we want to expand our platform support, especially on desktop systems. So we're working on Windows 10 desktop and also Linux desktop, Debian-based. And then we did some work with iOS, but as you know, with iOS, we can only do so much when it comes to the web view. So we're trying to put some of the extensions we've done for Crosswalk on top of the iOS web view, but in the end, the HTML rendering is still done by the system web view. We cannot change that because of restrictions. Also, Intel has a very cool technology called RealSense. You have a 3D camera, and you can do depth perception, gesture recognition, facial detection, and we're working on exposing all that as JavaScript APIs so that you can take advantage of it in your app. All right, so that was about it. To recap, Crosswalk is an advanced web runtime for Android. Consistency, extensibility are key. It's important that you have control over the upgrade cycle. So we saw that even with Lollipop and the most modern web view you can have, if it's updated under your feet, then it can cause problems to you. So while you pay in size, you gain in control using this kind of method. It's based on Blink and Chromium. Intel is behind it, so corporate backing. And it's easy to use, and it's open source. The site is crosswalkproject.org. We have mailing lists. We are on IRC. Be patient on IRC because our teams are all around the world. So usually when somebody asks a question, the person who can answer it is sleeping. So the mailing list is a bit better. But anyway, we are hanging there. And we are on Twitter. So if you want to ask questions on Twitter, you can do that as well, if it fits 140 characters. All right, how did I do? Oh.
Well, we got him in.
Thanks.
All right. Interesting. I found it very interesting to do the SIMD, or whatever you
SIMD,
pronounce it as, because we do it in Chakra on Microsoft Edge already. So the W3C web manifest is supported. That's also in the Manifold.js and in Windows 10 applications. So we're all going in a standardized way. I like that.
One day.
One comparison in Twitter was like that. It seems to be like a Chrome frame for Android, because Chrome frame for IE was like injecting the Chrome engine into Internet Explorer on old Windows machines. It was by yeah, I forgot his name right now, but it was basically the idea of upgrading old Windows machines. But you said it's not a replacement for WebKit in the old
for the web view.
But the web view,
it's not. Yeah, no, it's a standalone thing. So that's not the intention.
The main thing about the size, is there an idea that you would have a pick and mix option that you can say like, we need WebGL, we need web audio, but we don't need SVG, for example, because Samsung's phone version hasn't kicked out the SVG engine, and that's why they got it much more smaller.
Yeah, we thought about it and we looked into it. It's not very easy to do because right now the Chromium code base is not very much componentized in that way, so it's not easy to remove pieces as you want. But it's going in that direction, also upstream. And so it might happen. I don't think it's going to happen fast, but definitely that's one way. So that would be the optimal way if you could select the features. I agree, but it's tough.
That's excellent. Yeah, well, we're out of time. So they're outside. If you have more questions, if you want to see the demos, please go there and pester them as much as you can, because this is a really good product. And tell people about it, because I'm excited about it. I want to fix old Android devices, at least with functionality that we should have been given years ago already across different platforms. Thank you.
Thanks.